The Silent Void. Immerse's empire. The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. Humans had expanded across the stars, creating colonies, building alliances, and exploring the farthest reaches of space. They had mastered technology, conquered the unknown, and lived in harmony with their newfound worlds. For many, it felt like the calm before the storm, but no one could have predicted just how true those words would become. It was a quiet day, the kind that made everything feel ordinary. Ships were moving between planets, trading resources and passengers. Research stations sent their regular data reports. The lights of the far-off stars twinkled peacefully in the distance. Space seemed vast, unending, and calm. Yet, in the silence, something stirred. In the deep, empty stretches of space, beyond the reach of any known human settlement, a strange energy pulse shot across the galaxy. At first, it was weak, barely a blip on the radar of the advanced scanners monitoring the deep space. The pulse was unlike anything seen before. No one noticed at first. The vastness of the universe had always been filled with strange anomalies, rogue asteroids, cosmic storms, and the odd dying star. But this was different. This was something new. Hours passed before anyone took notice. A small, isolated research station on the edge of human space picked up the signal. It was faint, but the station's crew quickly realized this wasn't any ordinary cosmic event. This pulse, though weak, had a repeating pattern. It wasn't natural. It was a message, or at least something that resembled one. The researchers scrambled to decode the signal. It wasn't easy. The pattern was too complex, and the technology to understand it had never been needed before. After long hours of analysis, the message began to take shape. The words were scattered, broken, almost indecipherable, but one thing was clear. The message was a cry for help. Help, now, before it's too late. It was a simple phrase, but it echoed with a sense of urgency that left the researchers in a state of shock. They had never encountered anything like it. It was clear that whoever or whatever sent this signal was in grave danger. But the most unsettling part was where the signal had come from, far beyond the borders of human territory. From a region of space that humanity had never dared to explore. It was a region long considered unreachable, a vast emptiness known only as the Silent Void. The Silent Void was a name given to a portion of space where no human ships dared to venture. It was a place marked on star maps as an area of uncertainty, a region surrounded by myth and fear. No one knew what lay beyond it. Some believed it was home to ancient civilizations lost to time, while others whispered of dark forces, ancient and powerful, that lived in the depths of that cold, silent space. For decades, the void had remained undisturbed, until now. The research station, upon receiving this mysterious signal, immediately sent the data back to Earth. Within hours, the message reached the highest levels of government and military command. The top scientists, military officials, and even the president were briefed on the situation. What could this strange signal mean? And who could be sending it? Was it a trap, or was it a genuine call for help? The leaders of humanity knew that they had to act fast. The message was clear in its urgency. It had come from somewhere unknown, somewhere dangerous, and it seemed to be calling on humanity for aid. The question that lingered in every mind was whether they should respond. But how could they ignore such a plea? A decision was made. Humanity would answer the call, but the risk was great. The fleet, a collection of warships, exploration vessels, and resource carriers, would be sent into the Silent Void. They would venture into the unknown, with no idea what they might face. They would search for whoever or whatever sent the signal, and they would fight to protect humanity, no matter what it took. The first ships began to assemble at the main fleet base. The warships were already equipped with the latest technology and weapons, but there was something unsettling about the mission. The Silent Void was a place of fear, a place that had always been avoided. Now the fleet would sail straight into its heart. The fate of humanity might depend on their success. As the fleet prepared to leave, the atmosphere was tense. Crews worked quickly, checking equipment and finalizing plans. Officers gave speeches of bravery and duty, trying to lift the spirits of their men and women. But beneath the bravado, there was an undeniable sense of dread. No one knew what lay beyond the void. Was it truly a call for help, or something darker, waiting to swallow them whole? The signal had already begun to travel through the stars, reaching humanity's fleets. The fleets were now ready to answer. The question remained, would they be able to survive the journey into the unknown? The silent void had remained silent for so long, but now it was calling. And humanity, for better or worse, was about to answer. The response begins. As the message echoed through the halls of Earth's command center, the urgency of the situation became clear. The fate of humanity now rested on an answer to a call they did not understand. The signal, weak but persistent, had reached their radar, and time was running out. The silence of the silent void had been shattered, and there was no turning back. The entire world watched, waiting for their leaders to act. The response was swift. The United Earth Federation immediately called for an emergency meeting of all military leaders, scientists, and diplomats. A decision had to be made, and it had to be made fast. The message spoke of impending doom. Help, now, before it's too late. The words hung in the air, unanswered, but filled with a sense of finality that no one could ignore. The fleet, once scattered across human space, was now being rapidly assembled. Ships from all corners of the solar system began to rally, answering the call. Battleships, cruisers, and support ships were rapidly outfitted and loaded for the journey ahead. There was no time to waste. The unknown awaited them, and they had no idea what they might encounter. Humanity had never ventured so far into the galaxy. The space beyond the void had always been a mystery, a place marked on star maps with uncertainty and fear. But now, it had become the center of the universe. The fleet's destination was set. They were heading to a place where no human had ever been, and the fear of the unknown gripped the hearts of many. A small group of elite officers was chosen to lead the mission. These were the best and brightest, handpicked for their courage, intelligence, and leadership. Captain Elise Richards, a battle-hardened veteran, stood at the helm of the flagship, Aurora's Might. She had seen war and destruction before, but this mission was unlike any other. As she gazed out at the fleet, her heart pounded with both fear and determination. She knew that their enemies were unknown, and their chances of success were uncertain. But she also knew that humanity's resilience was unmatched. "We leave within the hour," Captain Richards said to her crew, her voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. "Prepare yourselves for the journey ahead. This will not be easy, but we are humanity's last hope. We don't know what's out there, but we will face it together. We will not turn back." As the countdown began, the fleet readied itself. The ships lined up in formation, each vessel a symbol of humanity's collective strength. The massive warships, each bristling with weapons and shields, moved into position. Smaller vessels, designed for scouting and quick strikes, darted between the larger ships. Together, they formed a wall of human power, ready to face the unknown. The command center on Earth continued to monitor the situation, tracking the fleet's movements as they left the safety of their home. Satellite feeds streamed in from every corner of the solar system, offering a glimpse of the fleet as it prepared to enter the silent void. Every single person on Earth, from the highest government officials to the civilians who followed the news, waited with bated breath. The journey to the void would take several weeks, and during that time, the fleet would need to navigate through the vast stretches of uncharted space. No one knew what they would find out there, whether it was an ancient civilization, an alien species, or something far worse. The only certainty was that the fleet would have to face whatever lay ahead. But as the fleet moved farther from Earth, something strange began to happen. Communications from Earth became increasingly difficult. The signal, which had been strong and clear, began to fade. The massive void of space seemed to swallow their transmissions. The vast distances between the fleet and Earth were becoming a problem. The farther they went, the more disconnected they felt from home. The fleet's crews, while skilled, were beginning to feel the pressure. They were entering uncharted territory, and it was impossible to predict what awaited them. Captain Richards stood on the bridge of Aurora's Might, watching the stars blur as the fleet entered hyperspace. The hum of the engines was the only sound in the otherwise silent bridge. She felt the weight of the mission pressing down on her shoulders. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands, and yet she could feel the growing uncertainty within herself and her crew. They were about to cross into the unknown. The silence of space seemed endless, stretching out in every direction, until the voice of the fleet's chief navigator broke the stillness. "We've entered the void, Captain," he said, his voice tense. "We're outside the reach of all known sensors. It's like something is blocking our path." Richard's heart skipped a beat. They had arrived. They had crossed the threshold. Beyond them lay the silent void, a place where no human had ever dared to go. But now they had no choice. They were already here, and the unknown was waiting. Humanity had answered the call. The fleet was now deep in enemy territory, and the question on everyone's mind was the same. What would they find in the dark expanse of space? Would it be salvation or destruction? The answer would come soon, and humanity would be ready. The fleet assembles. As the fleet crossed the threshold into the silent void, the enormity of their mission began to sink in. The stars around them seemed to vanish, swallowed by an almost oppressive darkness. The vast emptiness felt as though it could consume everything. Every ship, every person on board, was now a tiny speck in the face of the unknown. Captain Elise Richards stood on the bridge of Aurora's Might, looking out at the vastness before them. Her crew was busy with their tasks, preparing the ship for the unknown dangers that might lie ahead. The feeling of isolation was palpable. The farther they journeyed, the more disconnected they became from Earth, from everything they knew. They were alone. Yet, despite the crushing loneliness, the fleet moved forward, its ships following the lead of the flagship. There were over 100 vessels in total, each with its own purpose and role in this critical mission. Some ships were equipped for combat, others for exploration, and some for scientific research. The diversity of the fleet was humanity's strength. Each ship would play a vital role as they moved deeper into the void. The warships were the backbone of the fleet. Titan's Fury, the largest battleship, with its reinforced hull and devastating firepower, stood ready to face any enemy that might appear. The smaller, faster attack cruisers darted between the warships, ready to engage in lightning-fast strikes. Their sleek designs and advanced weaponry made them perfect for dealing with threats on the fly. Then there were the support ships, which had the critical role of providing logistics and medical assistance. Starlight Vanguard, a massive medical ship, was equipped with the latest in medical technology to treat any injuries that might occur during the mission. Its crew included some of the most skilled doctors and surgeons humanity had to offer. But it wasn't just the warships and support ships that made this fleet special. It was also the crew, the brave men and women who had volunteered for this dangerous mission. From the captains and commanders to the engineers and scientists, everyone had their role to play. And though they didn't know what awaited them, they were united by one thing: a shared commitment to humanity's survival. The next few days passed in a blur. The ships were all in constant communication, coordinating their movements, checking their equipment, and preparing for the challenges ahead. The fleet's sensors scanned the space around them, but the deeper they went into the void, the less they could detect. The area was eerily quiet. It was as if the void itself was blocking their sensors, hiding whatever lay ahead. During this time, Captain Richards began to notice something unsettling. There were no signs of life, no signals, no ships, no traces of any other civilizations. The void was not empty in the traditional sense. It was filled with the silence of the unknown, a silence that made everything feel more dangerous. She had expected to find some form of life or a clue as to who had sent the message, but so far, nothing had appeared. One evening, as Richards walked the corridors of Aurora's Might, she spoke with her second-in-command, Commander Gregory Hale. He was of calm and steady presence, always focused on the task at hand. "Captain," Hale said, his voice filled with concern. "I don't like this. It feels wrong. We've crossed into the void, and we're still getting no signs of anything. No transmissions, no ships, nothing." Richards paused and looked out the large window, her gaze drifting to the blackness beyond. The silence felt almost unnatural. "We can't turn back now. We have to keep moving forward." "I understand," Hale replied. "But there's something else. I've been monitoring the fleet's internal systems. They're glitching. Some minor malfunctions here and there, but still, it's strange. It's like the void is doing something to our equipment." Richards frowned. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet," Hale said, "but I've never seen anything like this. It's almost like something is interfering with our systems. It's subtle, but it's there." Richards nodded. "Keep an eye on it. We can't afford any surprises right now." The next few hours were filled with unease. The fleet continued to move deeper into the void, but the feeling of being watched, of being out of control, was growing stronger with each passing moment. The communications officer on Aurora's Might reported further malfunctions, and several of the ships in the fleet experienced similar issues. Sensors blinked on and off, and navigation systems became erratic. They were entering a region of space that seemed to defy all understanding. The void was not just empty, it was beginning to fight back. As the fleet ventured deeper, the strange feeling of being watched only grew stronger. The fleet was a well-oiled machine, prepared for every possible scenario. Yet nothing could have prepared them for this. Something was out there, lurking in the darkness. And whatever it was waiting for them. Captain Richards felt a chill down her spine as she glanced at the darkened space outside her window. It was then that she realized. The silent void wasn't empty. It was alive. The fleet was not alone. Something, some force, was watching them, and it would not let them leave without a fight. The stakes had just become much higher. The unknown had just become far more dangerous. The journey into the unknown. The days turned into weeks as the fleet continued its journey through the silent void, but the sense of unease never lifted. The malfunctions that Commander Hale had detected were growing more frequent, and more ships began reporting issues with their sensors and communication systems. No one knew exactly what was causing these disruptions, but the deeper they ventured, the more it seemed like something, or someone, was deliberately blocking their progress. Captain Elise Richards paced the command deck of Aurora's Might, her mind racing with possibilities. The silence of space around them was suffocating. They had crossed into a region of the galaxy where even the stars seemed to lose their brilliance. And yet there was a feeling in the air, something invisible but pressing. The void was no longer just an empty space. It felt like a living entity, watching, waiting, and perhaps even aware of their presence. "Captain, we're approaching a region of the void that even our scouts hadn't explored," Commander Hale reported as he stood beside the ship's navigation console. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his growing concern. "There's something strange up ahead. The readings are off the charts." Richards looked out into the vast darkness, her breath catching in her chest. It wasn't just the void that was troubling. They were heading straight into the heart of it. Whatever lay ahead, it was not something they were prepared for. But they had no choice but to move forward. "Prepare the fleet," Richards ordered. "We push on. Stay sharp, everyone. We're not turning back now." The ships moved in formation, the massive battleships and cruisers hanging like shadows in the deep space, their lights barely visible against the blackness. The sense of isolation was more overwhelming than ever before. The crew could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. There were no signals, no signs of life, and the strange interference was growing more intense. Even though the fleet was prepared for almost every scenario, the growing uncertainty gnawed at them. As the fleet pushed deeper into the void, an eerie calm settled over the ships. The hum of engines was the only sound on board, as every crew member waited for the other shoe to drop. And then it happened. Without warning, the fleet's communications were cut off. The vast network of intership communication went silent. The monitors flickered, then went dark. The crews scrambled to restore contact, but nothing worked. No messages from Earth, no signals from other ships. They were utterly alone. "Captain, we've lost all contact," the communications officer reported, his voice tense with fear. No response from any of the other ships. "We're cut off." Richards gripped the edge of her command chair, trying to stay calm despite the growing panic around her. "Patch into the fleet's emergency frequencies. Get me a response. Anything." The officers scrambled to their stations, trying to restore some form of communication with the rest of the fleet. Minutes passed, and every second felt like an eternity. Finally, one of the smaller ships, the scout vessel Vanguard, managed to send a distress signal back to Aurora's might. "Captain, this is Vanguard," came the voice of the scout ship's commander, but it was filled with static. "We've encountered something massive. We don't know what it is, but it's moving toward us." A chill ran down Richard's spine. "What do you mean, moving toward you?" "We're not sure. It's not a ship. It's more like a force, something alive. It's moving through the void like it's seeking us out. We've been trying to avoid it, but it's coming closer." The transmission was abruptly cut off, leaving only a burst of static behind. Richard's heart raced. She turned to Hale, her eyes filled with urgency. "Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers. Whatever it is, we're not going to sit here and wait for it." As the ships began to move in formation, trying to evade the unknown entity, the tension on the bridge of Aurora's might grew unbearable. Every ship in the fleet moved in unison, but the growing sense of dread was undeniable. Whatever Vanguard had encountered was now coming for them. Suddenly, the very fabric of the void seemed to ripple. At first, it was subtle, like a shift in the air, but then it became more pronounced. The stars ahead began to distort, bending and twisting unnaturally. The emptiness of space seemed to stretch, as if something was pulling at the edges of reality itself. The void was warping around them, and it was clear whatever was out there was not just watching them, but controlling the very space around them. "Captain, look," one of the crew members shouted, pointing to the view screen. Richards turned, her breath catching as she saw it. A massive, dark shape materializing ahead of them, its form incomprehensible in the dim light of the void. It was like a shadow, the living nightmare, floating in the center of space. It defied all logic and understanding, a shape that seemed to shift and pulse in the distance, as though it was alive, watching and waiting. It was massive, larger than any ship they had ever encountered, and it was moving toward them at an alarming speed. The strange force was no longer just a distant threat. It was here. "We need to move now," Richards shouted, her voice filled with fear and authority. "All ships, prepare for evasive action. This is not a drill. We are under attack." The fleet responded instantly, their ships breaking apart from formation as they raced to avoid the unknown entity closing in on them. But no matter how fast they tried to go, the dark shape seemed to keep pace, its presence growing stronger with each passing second. Captain Richards' mind raced. This was it, the moment they had feared. Something was hunting them in the void. The question was, what was it, and how would they survive it? The unknown had just become far more terrifying, and the fleet was now caught in its grip. The truth unfolds. The eerie presence in the void was closing in on the fleet with terrifying speed. Every ship in the fleet was now in full motion, attempting evasive maneuvers, but it was clear that no matter how fast they tried to move, the massive, dark shape pursuing them remained relentless. The chilling sense of being hunted was growing stronger by the second. The void, once a silent emptiness, had now transformed into a trap, and the hunters were ready to strike. Captain Elise Richards stood firm at the helm of Aurora's Might, her mind racing through every possible option. Their weapons were ready, but they had no idea what they were facing. It didn't seem like a ship or a conventional weapon. The entity, whatever it was, defied every law of known physics. It seemed to warp space itself, distorting the fabric of reality. Every instinct told her that their technology, their fleet, might not be enough to fight back. "We need to know what we're up against," Richard said, her voice steady but urgent. "Commander Hale, get me any data you can on this thing. I want to know everything." Hale worked quickly at his console, his eyes scanning data streams. "Captain, the distortions in space around us are unlike anything we've encountered. It's not just warping the space, it's disrupting our systems, even our basic navigation. We can't get a solid reading on its size, its shape, or even its origin. It's like it doesn't belong here." The mystery deepened with every passing moment. The fleet was now in full retreat, but their escape routes were closing fast. The dark shape had surrounded them, cutting off their way back. Richards could feel her pulse quicken. It was like a nightmare come to life. Something beyond comprehension, something ancient and dark. Then, just as the fleet reached a breaking point, the unimaginable happened. The shape ahead of them seemed to shudder, as if it was awakening from a deep slumber. Suddenly, the entire fleet was shaken by an overwhelming force. It wasn't just the usual disturbances from space or the malfunctioning systems. They could feel it in their very bones. A low, rumbling hum filled the air, vibrating through the ships. And then, the shape began to change. A massive structure began to unfold within the darkness. Metallic, yet organic, like the bones of some ancient creature rising from the void itself. The entity was not a ship at all. It was something far older. It was a structure, a city, or perhaps even a weapon from a lost civilization. Its design was incomprehensible, defying all known architectural forms. It was as if it had been built with a purpose beyond anything human minds could grasp. This isn't just a weapon," Hale whispered, his voice filled with awe and terror. "It's a living thing. It's alive." Richards gripped the arms of her chair, a chill creeping down her spine. "We've stumbled upon something ancient, something that's been here long before humanity ever ventured into space." The reality of their situation hit her like a wave. This wasn't just a trap, it was a test. The fleet wasn't meant to survive. They were meant to discover something far greater than themselves. The signal they had followed was not a plea for help, but a warning, a way to draw them here. The first of the fleet's smaller ships, the Vanguard, tried to approach the structure, its sensors probing for any signs of life. The crew aboard Vanguard had no idea what they were about to encounter. They were moving in too close. Without warning, the ship's communication systems exploded in static, and the ship disappeared from the fleet's radar. "Commander, Vanguard is gone," one of the officers on Aurora's Might called out, panic in his voice. "We can't locate them anymore. It's like they vanished." Richard's heart sank. She knew what this meant. Whatever that thing was, it had the power to erase entire ships from existence. The void wasn't just a void anymore. It was a prison, a place where this ancient force had remained dormant, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But there was still a small glimmer of hope. The fleet wasn't completely cut off from communication. Somehow, a message was being transmitted to them, distorted and fragmented, but a message nonetheless. It was coming from the structure ahead, from the very heart of the entity. Richard's hands tightened around the controls. "Open the transmission, now." The distorted voice came through the comms, crackling and warping. The words were barely understandable, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a warning. "You should not have come. You are not meant to know. Leave now, or face the consequences." The transmission cut off, and the fleet was once again plunged into silence. Richards turned to Hale, her mind racing. They knew we were coming. The signal we received wasn't a call for help. It was a trap. This thing was waiting for us. Hale nodded grimly. Whatever it is, it's ancient. It predates everything we know. But it seems to be more than just a weapon. It's a force, a presence, a living, breathing entity. Richards took a deep breath. We need to find a way to survive. We can't fight this thing head-on. But maybe we can uncover its weakness. Maybe, just maybe, we can stop it before it consumes everything. But as the fleet drew closer to the structure, Richards couldn't help but wonder, was humanity too late? Had they already triggered something that couldn't be stopped? Or was this only the beginning of a far greater conflict, one that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy? The truth was beginning to unfold, and it was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Humanity's stand. The fleet had entered the heart of the ancient structure, and the terrifying reality of the situation had set in. The massive, dark entity that loomed ahead was more than just a city, more than just a weapon. It was a living, breathing thing, older than anything humanity had ever encountered. And it was not just watching them, it was hunting them. Every move the fleet made, every attempt to escape, only seemed to draw the entity closer. Captain Elise Richards stood at the helm of Aurora's Might, staring at the dark expanse ahead. The fleet was now surrounded by the entity's shifting, organic structures. No one knew what the next move would be, but one thing was certain: humanity couldn't turn back. They had to fight, or they would be consumed, erased by this ancient force. "Captain, we're not going to survive if we don't do something," Commander Hale said, his voice filled with urgency. "The Vanguard is gone, and the rest of the fleet is losing communications. Whatever this thing is, it's draining our systems, weakening us. We can't even make a solid move against it." Richards nodded, her mind racing. The fleet was weakening, and every attempt to fight back was met with failure. The fleet's advanced weapons, their most powerful tools, had no effect on the entity. The shields and systems that had once seemed invincible were now crumbling under the immense pressure of the void. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Richards knew they couldn't give up. Humanity had always been defined by its resilience, its refusal to yield in the face of impossible odds. "Prepare the fleet," Richards ordered, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "We may not be able to fight this thing head-on, but we can do something it won't expect. We'll use its own power against it." Hale looked at her, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. "How? What can we possibly?" "We'll overload its own systems," Richards said, cutting him off. "This structure, it's alive, right? It's using some kind of energy to warp space, to control our ships. If we can find its core, we can destabilize its systems. We're going to set up a chain reaction, a power surge that will be too much for it to handle." It was a desperate plan, one that risked the lives of every single person aboard the fleet, but it was the only chance they had. Richards knew that if they didn't act now, the entity would finish what it had started, consuming them one by one until nothing was left. "Gather a team," Richards continued. "We'll send a strike team to infiltrate the structure. We need to get to its core and plant the charges. Everyone else will provide cover. It's our only shot." The next few hours were filled with preparations. Richards selected her most trusted officers and soldiers for the strike team. They would board a small shuttle and enter the heart of the entity. The shuttle would be their only means of reaching the core, and once they were inside, there would be no turning back. The strike team would have to plant the explosive charges that would disrupt the entity's power, causing a chain reaction that would tear it apart from the inside. As the strike team geared up, Richards shared a final moment of silence with her crew. They all knew the risks. They all knew that their chances of survival were slim. But they were ready. They were going to fight. And if they fell, they would do so knowing that they had given everything to protect humanity. The shuttle launched, moving swiftly toward the heart of the structure. The dark entity's shape loomed over them as they approached, its twisted, alien forms shifting with unnatural speed. The shuttle's engines roared as it punched through the shadowed void, aiming for the core of the entity. Inside the shuttle, Richards and her team braced themselves for the unknown. The structure around them seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, each beat sending a tremor through the hull of their vessel. As they moved deeper into the heart of the entity, the air seemed to grow thicker, as if the very space was becoming more oppressive. "We're almost there," Richards said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Prepare for entry." The shuttle reached the center of the entity, a vast chamber that defied all understanding. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, an endless expanse of dark, shifting energy, illuminated by flickering pulses of light. At the center of the chamber, a massive, pulsing core hovered, the source of the entity's power. "That's it," Hale said, his voice tense. "That's the core. Get the charges ready." Richards nodded. "Move fast. We don't know how long we'll have before it detects us." The strike team moved quickly, planting the explosive charges around the core. Every moment felt like an eternity. The hum of the entity grew louder, and Richards could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on her. She knew they had to be quick. If the entity realized what they were doing, it would destroy them before they had a chance to complete the mission. With the charges in place, Richards signaled to her team, "It's done. Let's move." But just as they were about to leave, the core emitted a terrifying roar. The entire structure seemed to shake, and the walls began to ripple. The entity had detected them. "Move. Now," Richards shouted, her heart pounding in her chest. The strike team sprinted toward the shuttle, but the core's energy was starting to destabilize. The room was alive with light and energy, and the air crackled with static. As the team boarded the shuttle, the walls around them seemed to close in, the very space distorting in on itself. With a final push, the shuttle blasted out of the core chamber, racing toward the exit. The core erupted behind them, sending a shockwave of energy through the structure. The fleet outside watched in awe as the dark entity began to break apart, its massive form crumbling as the chain reaction set in. The fleet's ships moved into position, ready to escape the collapsing structure. Aurora's might and the other vessels provided cover, ensuring the strike team's shuttle made it back to safety. The entity's form continued to disintegrate, the once imposing structure now nothing more than a cloud of energy and debris. As the fleet began its retreat, Richard stood at the helm of Aurora's might, watching the entity's final moments. The dark shape that had haunted them for so long was finally fading into nothingness. The fleet had done it. They had survived. But the victory was bittersweet. The truth of the entity's existence, its purpose, and its power was something humanity would never fully understand. They had answered the call, not just to save a distant galaxy, but to confront an ancient darkness that had nearly consumed them all. Humanity had stood firm against the unknown, and they had won. But the question remained, what else was out there, waiting to be discovered? And would humanity be ready when the next call came? The fleet sailed on, carrying with it the memory of the battle they had fought and the strength they had found in each other. The galaxy had changed, and so had humanity. They had proven that no matter what the universe threw at them, they would always stand together.